I think we're going to get started, guys. Thank you all for joining us in the screening room. And although we won't be screening any new films today, we're excited we got a spot that's walking distance from most of the action here during Ad Week. And I really wanted to open up the conversation today. We've got our first panel before we bring on Jon Patel to talk about the future of programmatic media. I want to start with a few kind of facts and set the table for the conversation we're going to have. So with that, sometimes there are trends that exist and people talk a lot about them, and sometimes we feel that maybe they're overemphasized. And clearly programmatic is one of those trends. I think we were talking, I don't know if it was the green room, but maybe the bar upstairs, Jon and Steven and I, about has programmatic jumped the shark? This year at Ad Week, I think it's fair to say that this has been the theme. And there's a good reason for that. Let's face it, every quarter we see new results come out from IDC or Magna Global or The Economist talking about how big can programmatic media buying be. And every quarter these projections come out and they're bigger than the last. And so these are truly eye-popping statistics. I think IDC's last estimate that was published in The Economist was that by 2018 we'd have about $27 billion of spend going through programmatic pipes. Well, just a couple of days ago, Magna Global is now projecting $53 billion. So it's definitely been talked a lot about, but I think it bears repeating. Programmatic is here, and it's on fire. So we're excited to have a few of the innovative leaders in that space with us today to talk about some perspectives. Secondly, another trend that everyone talks about, and maybe we feel maybe this year finally was the year of mobile, but it bears repeating that mobile is not only big, it's going to be the majority. We already know that in terms of the Mary Meeker slide of where audiences are spending their time consuming media, it's already crossed the line. One of our clients, the Financial Times, has talked about the majority of the consumption of media on ft.com comes from mobile devices. Well, within a few years, again from the Magna Global research that came out, by 2019, 54% of all programmatic spend will be through mobile. And I think we'll start to see, we've talked a lot about cross-device and how do we extend desktop into mobile. I think in a few years from now, the conversation will be, how do we extend mobile onto desktop? Because desktop will be the minority. And then finally, I think, when we talk about programmatic and we think about what is it that we're actually creating here, and this last slide I think is a good segue for our second panel. We're really talking about what's one of the most complex marketplaces that's ever been created. I think in a book that Jon Patel wrote a couple of years back, he talked about Google having built through its search engine a database of intentions. I think what we're seeing with the creation of programmatic marketplaces is really a marketplace for human attention. And unlike the stock market, where you've only got a few thousand equities and a stock of GE is the same in the morning as it is at night, when it comes to these programmatic marketplaces, there are 7 billion humans moving through time and space and content context around the globe. And the idea that we can, for the first time as marketers, as technologists in this space, address a person in the evening while they're reading an article in the New York Times, thinking about their next trip to Hawaii, that's a pretty remarkable thing. And it's starting to come to fruition. And so here it's really just pointing out that compared to the New York Stock Exchange, programmatic is about 100 times the scale in terms of the number of daily transactions that are brokered. And in terms of the complexity of those transactions, about 10x as large. So this is just an absolute massive amount of data, perhaps more data than has ever been created in any market in the history of the planet. And with that, today we're here to talk about a few folks who have been a part of the revolution. I'd like to introduce our two panelists that are joining us. We've got Jon Suarez-Davis, who's going to be the voice of probably the most innovative marketers out there, Kellogg Company. We've got Steven Rosenblatt joining us, Chief Revenue Officer from Foursquare. Some guys who know a lot about data and certainly know a lot about mobile. So with that, gentlemen, I'm going to invite you up to kick things off. Oh, sure. Okay, great, thank you. So guys, I want to kick it off with what we were talking about before we came up here. is really, and it gets to that sort of definitional discussion. Everyone's talking about programmatic. We've got IDC and Magna Global projecting the amount of spend going through. I think the thing that is on everyone's minds is, what is it? Okay, so it's big, but how do we define it? What does programmatic mean to you? And I guess I'll start, John, with you as a marketer. Frankly, the guys writing the checks. I'll preface by saying we saw a note in Q2 that came out from AdExchanger. They said that the biggest barrier to marketers actually engaging in the programmatic markets was lack of understanding of what programmatic is. So clearly Kellogg's, you guys are different, but what does it mean for Kellogg's? How do you guys define programmatic media buying?
Well, about 5 years ago, we determined that we needed to find, quite frankly, a new way to approach the marketplace. I wouldn't be totally honest if I didn't say that it was partially in the form of actually a crisis, spending a significant amount of money in digital media, online display, online video, even at that time, and it was simply we're not getting the return on it that we needed, both from a return on investment standpoint as well as, quite frankly, just the resources it took. We had the head of one of our business units, kind of cornered me in the office one day and said, "Hey, I just need to understand why is it that we spend at that time 90% of our budget on TV, and it only takes a handful of people to execute it, and yet I got 10% of my budget in digital, and I need 10 times the amount of people," and I had no damn good answer for him.
Efficiency,
yeah.
Isn't that what they always say about TV?
Exactly. So what we did is we said, okay, then as far as we kind of dug into programmatic as we defined it at the time, was just an efficient and an effective method for delivering impressions to audiences that our brands found most valuable. And I mean, it was quite honestly, it was a very simple definition. It's a definition that we still hold today at Kellogg's. And I will agree with you. It does feel like we've jumped the shark. We've talked about it. We've been here. I've been here. 72 hours, and I think it's really programmatic week, not ad week. It's incredible. And hopefully we can get past the definition and have the conversation turn more to the benefits of it. But that would be our definition of it.
So Steven, how when people ask Foursquare about how can I do some programmatic buying of Foursquare's audiences or inventory, what does it mean? How do you guys define it for marketers?
Well, I think it goes back to what is the definition of programmatic. There's the automation piece of our industry, which is how do we create, how do we make things more efficient? The idea that we still push paper and contracts and IOs and different billing systems, and there's still so much inefficiency in the buying process. So there's the automation piece, which all of us would like to see solved, and been doing this for almost 16 years, and the fact that we've made some changes, but some things are still the same is a problem. Then there's, I think, there's the data-driven part of kind of what falls under programmatic. I think there's an incredible amount of data now being generated, and there are companies that are really smart about understanding what the data means. I mean, data for the sake of collecting data and not doing anything with it, not knowing how, with no real benefit, isn't good for the consumer. It's certainly not good, doesn't do any good. But when you have all this data, the question is, what are some of the solutions you can create that are beneficial for your consumer, for your user, but also that can help you build a business around. So I think there's a data-driven part of programmatic. I think a huge driver under the programmatic umbrella is data-driven ad experiences, and so that's really where we fall into the equation, where Foursquare is taking a tremendous treasure trove of data that we have about how consumers go about the world, their daily habits, how the consumer journey every day that we see, and we're allowing marketers to connect with our consumers, our users, when they're not necessarily on Foursquare, understanding what the places that are relevant and important to the user.
So let's take, I think we were talking a bit about these three pieces that fall into the programmatic umbrella. First, the data element and how that's playing an ever bigger role. Second is sort of the buying platforms and the buying technologies that are out there, and the third piece being measurement. So maybe to take each of those in turn. By the way, I have no trouble hearing you guys up here. I'm totally fine because I'm so close. You guys are on. So I guess John, you and I spoke a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about some of the incredibly rich data that as a CPG company, Kellogg's has about your households, how you interact with that. Maybe just tell us a bit. Since that crisis or that catalyzing event of a couple of years ago, as you guys started to move into making a bigger bet on programmatic media buying, how have you guys started to use data to drive some of those bets?
Well, early on, we had to, as we moved, we call programmatic first strategy. So again, 5 years ago, we were zero programmatic. This year will be, especially in North America, will be upwards of 60+% of our online display and video will be programmatic. And what we've seen, again, as we were able to level set, if not decrease the CPM, we saw an increase in the effectiveness in the CPG world. We measure that mostly through our market mix analysis. So what that did is it started to uncover and unlock a lot of what you were just talking about as to the role of data. And so we started to use our what we call our relationship marketing and our loyalty marketing data to really get into deeper segmentation and a deeper understanding of where to find those audiences and then where to deliver the impressions. And that, again, over this would be our fifth year of that programmatic first strategy. We continue to see that pay dividends.
No wonder you're so tired of this word programmatic. It's been 5 years of programmatic first, right?
Yeah, it's been. But what I will say with that is that for each year, this is a really interesting thing though. Every year we get more visibility, right, and more visibility into how we're doing and how our approach is playing out in the marketplace. And with more visibility, you actually get more questions. So I could say, in fact, even meetings in the last 48 hours have brought up some new learnings and some new data as it pertains to our programmatic first approach in online display and online video as it pertains to this, still massive amount we spend in linear TV. So ironically, I will walk out of Ad Week or Programmatic Week, whatever you want to call it, with actually probably more questions, ironically, on some basic fundamental assumptions I have on our linear broadcast TV. And I think that's key because I think it speaks to the importance of data. I think the point is absolutely dead on. And with data that informs the planning, the buying, the optimization of your paid media channels, I think we're going to be in a long journey. Unfortunately, this will probably be Programmatic Week for many years to come. In the sense that I think we're just starting at the tip of the iceberg of what we're going to unlock to truly understand how media is consumed.
And so who are some of the partners that you guys use today? Who's your major partner managing some of that household and buying data for Kellogg?
Well, on the kind of a couple key parts, our household level data as it pertains to our relationship marketing and our loyalty is an in-house solution coupled with Epsilon. And kind of think of that as your core database marketing, for lack of a better term. And then our key partner, and again North America on the DMP, is Crux. And then we have a few big bets. We try to do fewer bigger bets with key partners so that we can go deep with them, because it's another key learning into this. When we first did our programmatic approach, we went to the marketplace with a couple of DSPs, and we actually called that down really quite quickly, because what we determined is that one of the keys of success was to get really, quite frankly, intimate and deep in both each other's business, because it was such a complex area. So we really just have a couple of key partners, Brightwell on the video side, DoubleClick, RMX on some of the display.
So speaking of data, I think clearly, Steven, over the last couple of years and in the recent months, anyone who's read about Foursquare, I think has seen Dennis speaking publicly about it's not just the audiences that you guys bring to your app, but it's the data that you guys have on sort of where people are spending their time, around the globe or in the cities where Foursquare is most popular. Tell us how you guys are doing things with the Foursquare data. There was an announcement recently about the Foursquare Audience Network. What are you guys doing, and how do you think what you're doing could be relevant to what other publishers ought to do who maybe don't have the same kind of technology background that Foursquare does?
Yeah, well, I mean, it starts. Can you guys hear? Is my mic working back there? You guys hear? Okay, good. First of all, about 60+% of our company are engineers, and it starts with having the engineering talent and the capabilities to actually do the analysis. And so we have some of the most incredibly talented world's best engineers. So I think that's a start. You got to kind of believe in it, and you got to invest in it, and I think that's number one. Yeah, we see, we have our users generate tremendous amount of data. If you think about, the assets kind of under the hood of Foursquare, you have over 65 million places that are in our place database, probably the biggest in the world. Maybe Google is up there. And within each place, you have lots of little snippets of content that users have told us about those places. And so every time they tell us something about those places, what we call tips, we analyze those tips to see what people are saying within those tips. So we start to analyze the meaning within the tips and what are kind of common words and common themes that are that people are talking about. And then 6.5 billion times, kind of certainly people have checked into a place. So that's basically, here's a lat longitude and a timestamp that says I am at this physical location tied to that POI that we have. And then in addition to that, over the last couple of years, even if people aren't explicitly checking in, we still we see about 2 billion location trails every single day. So you start to look at this massive data infrastructure, and then there's about 65,000 apps that use Foursquare's place location. So we're getting a lot of data in from the Pinterest of the world, the Vines of the world, the Flickrs, Microsoft, that we're powering a lot of their locations. So you start to, there's this incredible data footprint there.
And tell us, from even for someone like Jon at Kellogg's, I know you guys have relationships with other marketers like Heineken. How does that data translate into higher ROI for a marketer?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of ways. And so if you're a merchant, you have a physical location. Some of the things that are interesting to them are, am I reaching loyal or lapsed customers, right? Has someone been to my store recently? How frequently? Have they not come to my store? Are they going to my competitors? What do they do when they leave my store? Are they going, are they walking out of a Target and going to a Walmart or going to a Walgreens? That's the stuff, that we help people that have physical locations understand. Mm-hmm. Brands want to understand, especially in the spirits and beer industry. They have no idea. They spend millions and millions of dollars on on-premise events. They have no idea if people consume their alcohol or when they, after those events, what those people do.
We're tracking all of you during the happy hour, by the way.
So we have a lot of insights into helping marketers understand whether it's you have a physical location. 90+% of commerce and transactions still happen at physical brick and mortar. So, again, I think that's what's really appealing to marketers. It's tying the physical and digital world together.
Now, Foursquare, like many publishers, has clearly some amazing data. One thing that we chatted about, Jon, was a theme that we've seen a lot. You're mentioning a Wired article that came out 5 years ago that was talking about walled gardens in the technology space. Foursquare, despite incredible data assets, that data is, if you want to use it to buy against with Turn, talk to Steven, because that's the only place today where you can buy Foursquare segments is through Foursquare. So Jon, this rise of the walled gardens where, Google says, you have to work, only can work with Google and their stack, and Twitter's got their own technology, their own data. How do you see this impacting your job as a marketer at Kellogg, where people seem to be erecting, as opposed to lowering the walls and creating kind of more sharing of either technologies or data, people seem now to be raising those walls. How is that impacting your job and your team's job at Kellogg's?
It's going to make it more difficult, I think, is probably the obvious answer. If you think about maybe the last 10 years, just using that as a framework, initially when marketers would speak to a Google or a Facebook, what have you, we were literally speaking, two different languages. And quite frankly, it was really quite painful. And
it must be all those engineers they've got
working. And they have very much, literally we weren't speaking the same language. And I think all those that I just mentioned made significant changes. I know they made significant changes to really understand, what our objectives were, what success looked like, and they've made incredible progress. It feels though now we may be bumping into a barrier, in that, and I understand it, I mean, from a market dynamic standpoint, but as you mentioned, what especially after the events that we're hearing this week, that the walled gardens are going to go up, and that you know, some really key players in the industry are setting their footings for a kind of battle. And I think it's unfortunate in the sense from a marketer standpoint, because we would obviously we would like to operate in the most frictionless way possible that we can. And what it's going to do, at least in the short term, it is going to force us to make decisions on winners and losers, where we place our investment. And I think you know, that's not the most efficient way to go to the marketplace. Now, I mean, I'm in no position, nor really is any one single marketer in a position to try to fight the dynamics of the marketplace per se, but I do think, and I'm hopeful, that the major players will, with their knowledge of what we're trying to do, and that is deliver exceptional brand experiences across multiple channels, that again we will have maybe a cooler heads will prevail as far as how we interact with them. But I think it's going to be a pretty interesting ride, maybe for the next year or two. And I actually think that maybe some on the marketing side, whether it's a more stronger relationship with our marketing colleagues, we need to have maybe a little more of a single voice back to the our other value partners as to how we like to interact.
So, Steven, what's your perspective on this? For why do you think, if you were to project, we're talking a bit about why does a company like a Twitter or a Facebook go down this path? Obviously, Foursquare's seen a jump, a resurgence of activity since your relaunch last month. What caused you guys? Why do you think some of these technology companies are taking this path? And maybe you can talk about why you guys are maybe taking a different path.
Well, I think they're taking it because they can. I think they when you have kind of the big four of Apple, Google, Facebook, and Amazon, and Twitter kind of maybe kind of on the outside, right in that group, they can. They're powerful, and so it benefits their own company, and so you kind of understand that. I think though the other thing too, there's a lot. I think privacy is a huge topic, and I think privacy is we're just at the early stages of a lot of discussion, a lot of eyes certainly in DC on kind of the concept of privacy. And so I think there is a privacy side to this. It's not all capitalism rearing its head. It's I think companies that have data, and especially with the NSA and all these data breaches that are going on, I think there's a lot to be said about protecting and understanding the integrity of the data from a consumer perspective. So I think you have that going on. For Foursquare, I mean, we're still a small private company. We don't necessarily have the capital at this stage to go out and acquire the assets needed to build all the stack. So we don't, we are partnering with different companies. We have to partner with different companies. The question is, will that ultimately be, because we have to, will that be the smarter strategy anyway? I don't know. But I think that's kind of where we're choosing to work with others.
So you guys have a partnership with Turn, one of course the big four DSPs. Jon, I would turn to you and ask, there's all this different marketing technology out there. There's a lot of technology vendors. Obviously Metamarkets is one of them. Where do you see, on the one hand, you've got groups like Rocket Fuel and Turn and MediaMath providing buying technology. You've got DMPs, of course, providing a way to manage data, and you guys obviously work with some DMPs as well. And then you've got the emergence of these sort of traditionally software companies like Oracle and Salesforce and Adobe, who are all building marketing clouds. Again, given that you guys ultimately are writing the checks, right? Everyone's trying to get to the CMO. How do you guys sort of see these different stacks intersecting? How does it work today, and where do you see it going in the next few years? Or where would you like to see it go?
Yeah, I think it's probably more the latter one I'd like, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
it's out of my wheelhouse to really, I mean, I'm obviously in it every day, but it's definitely not my core competency to provide a comment or a criteria or a critique, I should say, of stacks. But what we have said very clearly is that to the extent that we can have a unified stack that facilitates our marketing objectives, then that's how we lean into it first. The second component of that is if we find that there are other best-in-breed technologies or components that we believe provide an incrementally bigger value than being in the unified stack, then we go to it. So I think what's helped, at least from us from a marketer's perspective, is we're very principle-based. Kind of we have a programmatic first principle, we have investment performance principle, we have the how we view technology principle, which is again unified unless we can determine that some other component of it can be of value. And I think in our case a good example would be Crocs. We just determined, right, wrong, or indifferent, that we believe that the DNP should have somewhat of a church and state, somewhat of a plug and play component to our overall stack approach. And so we specifically chose them versus having it integrated into, let's say, another DSP that provides both. And I think it's really important to say it's not me saying that's the right way to do it. It's more of how we've chosen to do it, and a lot of it has to do with the capabilities that we have, right, as a company, and how we need to approach it.
Are you guys working with any of those, with Oracle or Salesforce or Adobe's marketing cloud technologies or software today?
Yeah, for example, on social tools. So, and I gotta always keep this straight, right? So we were with Rachel 6 and Buddy Media, right? So that's it's like a bingo card game, right? So the answer is yes. I mean, we use that in our social media. We use good data visualization. We're a decent size, $15 billion company. So we do have a decent amount of other providers that will go.
So we've talked a lot about data. We've talked about some of the buying technology and the marketing stacks that are out there. I think that the third leg of the stool that we haven't talked about, but you alluded to with separating church and state, with measurement being a place where we really want to separate church and state. I guess I'll pitch it to Steven at Foursquare. After you cut a big deal with major spirits producer. How do you kind of justify to them the value of their marketing partnership with Foursquare? What are some of the measurements that you guys provide, and what sort of outside validation do you get for clearly if Foursquare says, hey, we did a great job, that's the fox money in the hen house. How do you guys sort of get that outside verification?
Yeah, I mean, there's several ways. I think one is the classic traditional, way which marketers still very, are comfortable with, tried and true, is partnering up with third-party research companies that do a lot of the industry analysis and put us on par with any other media that they're measuring. So whether it's working with a Nielsen or Miller Brown, your traditional ad effectiveness kind of approach or control exposed kind of approach is one. And then there's obviously our own proprietary data, which we're able to, so again, we're able to tell marketers, who are, let's say, fan, for example, our Foursquare Audience Network, if we're serving an ad and someone's exposed to an ad or engages with an ad, we're able to kind of match those users with Foursquare users to then figure out what places those people have been over a period of time. So that's a way. There's lots of different ways. And then there's also just, for some folks, they measure transaction and actual commerce. So whether it's with long relationship we've had with the American Expresses of the world, where they're able to see the actual spend data coming through and to figure out where, from a merchant standpoint, basket size, where does Foursquare fit, and then how much money is being spent. So I think there's a number of different measurement tools in place, and it really depends on. I think at the end of the day, it's what's the marketer's objective, right? It comes down, what's the business objective that they're trying to reach. It's not a tactical, like how many clicks, which I still can't believe we still talk about, but it's truly a real business objective in terms of how it's helping move the key metrics for the company.
And I think American Express is pretty unique in the sense that unlike the other credit card companies who are just issuers, they actually have the data on their they have much richer data on their users
Yeah, they own the full stack, yes,
than others. So to that question of marketing objectives, that's a term I've heard you use several times, John, in conversations about, it's, and I think the way you framed it was the reason you have a closer relationship and you guys are often going direct to Yahoo or direct to a Pinterest is because you said the marketing objectives are really important to get those across and get that close relationship. You need to go direct as opposed to work with an agency. Maybe just expand a little bit on what are some of those marketing objectives for Kellogg's and your programmatic campaigns, and why do they differ from from relationship to relationship? How do you guys sort of set those up and then check to make sure they're being met?
Yeah, well, I mean, our core objectives, typically don't change from a fundamental standpoint, right? We're trying to break through. We're trying to persuade, trying to drive purchase intent that ultimately leads to a brand affinity, in purchase. And so, on a macro basis. But I think the key is that we talked about this before. Unlike in the past, largely in let's say even a broadcast or a print or for lack of a better, even old school digital, where it was largely a transaction, just this insertion order, that could largely be executed by a marketer telling agency going out and pulsing the marketplace and getting that the most efficient transaction to be filled, coming back. What we're doing now, what we all know is that, again, as we talked about, is that we need to have a much more intimate understanding of the audience segment, the data that we're using, and we've also gotten more sophisticated in taking those macro objectives and driving down in a much more, let's say, near time. Real time is still not really relevant to CPGs. I always get a little laugh when somebody at CPG says real time, because there's practically nothing real about real time about CPG, but near time.
Not yet.
No, I'm sure it will come, but we're still relatively, as an industry, it's a pretty, it's like moving the Titanic, afoot. But it's so that just requires a much deeper relationship. So we would have to have, if we're doing something with Foursquare, I would want our team. When I say our team, sits in what's called Center of Excellence, as well as any, let's say, brands like Popeyes or Pringles or what have you. Would want to have more work sessions with like a Foursquare, and we would want them closer in, along with the agency in almost all cases. But we want them, instead of one step removed, we would want them to be within the process, all the way up to in the front of where value is created, and helping us ideate, and helping coming up, co-creating solutions, and then facilitating the process all the way through. So it really is not to minimize the role of the agency. It's really not. It's unfair to again kind of throw stones at the agency per se. It's just that by the nature of how the marketplace has moved, we simply need deeper relationships with a much larger array of partners.
So, Steven, as someone who's got obviously brand relationships, what do you see as someone who's been in the industry for 19 years? What do you see as the evolving role of the agency, both from your perch as Chief Revenue Officer at Foursquare, and from just your interactions with others in the space? How do you think it changes from where it is today, and how does programmatic affect that?
I think traditionally in the past, a lot of time has been wasted, or agencies have been used to manage the kind of the process. So there's a lot of inefficiency, a lot of time spent on lower value, I'd say actions. I see the successful. I think agencies, those that will continue to thrive and succeed in the future, are becoming more like McKinsey, or Bain, being more consultative and strategic in helping drive business objectives. I mean, it goes back, I think John said, with silos, if you're a marketer and you're spending 70% of your budget with 3 companies, do you really need the agency to just, are you paying them a lot of money to just manage that? I don't know how much value there is, and are they really then spending most of their time on the other 30%? So I think the evolving role of the agency is to be an extension of marketing departments, but to provide that strategic insight and higher level value, I think, is really what's going to change or what's going to be asked from those agencies that will continue to thrive and succeed in the future.
I totally agree. I mean, I can add, I'm not sure the makeup of the audience, but I mean, the days largely, should be anyway, of mass distribution of RFP to the marketplace and really like a cattle call, right? And then that coming back, I truly believe are over, or at least should be. I mean, I'm from the agency. I've spent many years on the agency side, so I can tell you that there's an incredible amount of inefficiency and waste. Oh, but not just the agency, like the client, us, the marketer. We give them, crap on the form of a brief. What do? They just take it and they just put that crap out to the to the marketplace, and what do we get back? We get back crap. So, and I've seen it. And I audited. One of the first things we did is we audited all the briefs out in a pretty major campaign, and it was just abysmal. I mean, absolutely abysmal. It was abysmal. It started from crap brief again from us, and then we did an audit. And first of all, you guys give like 36 minutes to respond to it. It comes in, it needs to be done in half an hour, and you don't really have the insights. You don't really have what you need to develop these kind of solutions that we're asking you for. So I think you're absolutely right. And just it is a little easier now being on the client side in the sense of giving agency advice, but I think that there is a role for them to elevate up into that much more strategic counsel that we talked about. It's granted there's a problem in the revenue model that they have, because it's going to go from FTE based to value of their time, but that is the direction from my perspective.
So, if you had to pick in this stack, in this organizational stack of agency and agency trade desk and DSP and exchange, and then, with you guys sort of sitting at the opposite ends of this continuum, the publisher on the far end and the market on the other, who stays and who disappears? So clearly, no one is predicting or at least neither of you predicted the death of the agency. But clearly there's too many intermediaries. I'll play to Steven. What happens between the agency trade desk and the DSP?
I think what marketers and what the customer wants, the marketer wants is is the right technology solution for their business. And so the question is, which, and there's a lot of debate and discussion about, what agencies truly have their own technology solution, how much are they licensing, how much are they middlemen and brokers, how much are they marking up, transparency of price that's all going to have to work itself out over the next couple of years. I think what we'd all like to do is spend less time dealing with low value stuff and things that should be solved. It's a waste of our time too on the publisher side when you get just tons of RFPs, but frankly, you're not getting any feedback on them anyway, right? So the more we can spend time as an ecosystem on things that are higher value, that can truly innovate and revolutionize the business and push things forward, the better it is for everyone. So what does that mean? I think hopefully programmatic and this kind of to bubble it all up, is we automate a lot of the inefficiencies, the pushing of paper, the inefficiencies in billing, and solve that problem, which takes so much time and people resources right now still, and move that time to really thinking strategically and creatively and putting that money back into technology solutions that solve the marketer's pain point is what I'd like to see.
And John, what are your thoughts on
I agree with everything you just said.
Yes, agreed.
Yes.
So one thing we haven't talked about, and maybe this is not the Ad Week this year is and I haven't been to as many events as you guys may have been, but the question of video. And you mentioned a little bit, maybe just at the beginning here about linear TV, addressable television. John, what are you seeing from your perspective on the opportunities for taking programmatic first entry into your video buying at Kellogg? What's happening in the video space right now from your perspective?
Well, it's really one of the most dynamic parts, right, that we work with as a major branding company. We like sight, sound, and motion. So we're very comfortable in that space from a macro standpoint. It's one of the reasons why we've continued to have double-digit increases in the online video space. But I think we talked about a couple of years ago internally we believe that TV, right, would take the cue from digital and largely programmatic, and I think, with a couple of the players in the marketplace now, some medias of the world, and a couple other things, you're starting to see that, push into the edges, the fringe, right, of linear broadcast. And I guess what I would say is that specifically over the last, I'd say, 2 or 3 months, and even, again, a couple of things that have taken place this week with some meetings, we are starting to gain a deeper understanding of just some of the most basic things, just like what we have perceived as planned region frequency versus actual delivery. There's some things coming out of there that are intriguing, especially as it pertains to the role of online video, right, as either an extender or looking at light TV users or even specific segments like a Hispanic segment. So this is an incredibly dynamic time. I mean, if you're in this business and you're not excited, well, let's put it this way: if you're in this business and you're not up for a hell of a roller coaster ride for the next X amount of years, it's not a good one. But it's a great time to be in the business. I mean, because this is, I think we were with, I think it was Tim Armstrong, and there is no question that when this starts attacking the billions and billions of dollars that are in broadcast. It's going to be a fun ride. It's going to be a fun ride.
What percent of your budget right now do you guys allocate to some form, programmatic budget? What percent would you say goes into video?
Of the programmatic side? Well, actually, interestingly, programmatic, because we had to largely, we picked from the playbook of display and then enhanced. We were programmatic first from get-go on video. So the vast majority of our online video is programmatic. In fact, we backed away from the upfront. We did not participate in the upfront on a video basis this past year, and we have no plans to at this point, we have no plans to revisit that. So the vast majority of our online video is executed programmatically.
Wow. Steven, what are you guys seeing as a publisher in terms of the packages that you're putting together for your relationships? How much is video? Is there any video right now in Foursquare in-app, and any plans to? And then in terms of the inventory that you guys are making available through the Foursquare Audience Network, how much of that is video?
So today in-app, there's we haven't quite figured out the optimal video experience. It's Foursquare as a utility, and I think we think about it, but we haven't quite figured out what that would look like. As far as though buying, a lot of our Foursquare Audience Network, so buying off of Foursquare using our data, a lot of the actual creative is using video, kind of as the distribution mechanism, or as the content that's being the output, with the data being driven from kind of the insights from what we have. So.
Great. I'm gonna turn over to the audience for some Q&A, and I've got a few additional questions that I'll keep in my jacket pocket. So a lot of topics that we covered here. Anything from the group out there in the screening room that you want to pitch at either Jon or Steven, based on what you've heard? James Green of Magnetic.
Hey, I got a little bit of an in-the-weeds question for you, Jon. As you have people pitching to you from the Marketing Cloud and from ad tech and all sorts of vendors, there's a lot of different pricing models out there. The Marketing Cloud is primarily SaaS-based, and then in ad tech you get people who are selling you media on a performance basis, and then there's some people who just taking a percentage cut. As you look at these different pricing models and they all compete in the market, sometimes you can have the same product with 3 different pricing models: SaaS, transparent, percentage, non-transparent, performance-driven, same product. Do you care? Does it matter to you at all how it's priced? Do you care only about the performance, or do you care about the transparency of media? Or would you like to just pay every month and know that you're getting a platform? Does this matter to you, not matter to you?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Let me see if I can want to do it justice by answering it the right way. It does matter. I'm not necessarily as concerned with the construct, whether it is a SaaS or a rev share model. I am very concerned and very attentive to the transparency. And thank you for asking that question, because I should have also pointed out in our programmatic first strategy, it was one of our core principles was to gain, or it was to partner with an ecosystem where we could gain visibility and transparency into where value was created and where it was lost. So that's a very key part. And I think also what we have been very cognizant about is that it's not the Kellogg's way. It's not as if by any stretch we have the answer. So that's why I'm not as concerned about, hey, I want a rev share, I want this. We don't kind of believe in our way or the highway. We've worked in a couple of those different models, and what's interesting as we've played that out over the last 3-4 years, I don't really. It's not clear to me if one is better than the other. And what's also interesting is a lot of it has challenged our conventional thinking at the time. Like, let me give you an example, like rev share. Well, we said in a rev share model, right? We have X%, and obviously that as it goes up, we'll pour money into it. Well, we fundamentally, if you think of media, we got off the commission basis, 20 years ago. So what we thought was the greatest thing in the world. Why the hell would we ever go back to basically a commission basis? We just spent the last 20 years getting off of it. But in truth and with humility, you start to understand what are the key drivers. What is most important to you, right? So, you know what? When we went off the commission, we went to FTEs. That actually incentivized potentially the wrong behavior, even though we thought at the time it was right. So, it's a great question, and my only counsel with that is for anybody that really believes they have some incredibly strong conviction as to they understand what the right model is, I just challenge that convention. I think it's a smart move to have a couple of different structures in the marketplace and understand not only the performance that you're looking for, the core KPIs, target audit, or reach frequency, effective CPM, etc., but also importantly, what are the non-tangible behaviors or motivation that model is creating for you, and that's a really key. That's a key component.
Other questions? I'm going to ask James a follow-up. What is the model of magnetic of the ones that you described?
Yeah, so it's the one you don't like. So we sell, and we've been struggling with it because most people who sell like us are in a similar position. We sell media at a fixed price, and we make a margin, and the margin is made up of multiple parts. Our cost of data, it's our cost of media, and it's our cost of tech. And we're sort of loath to admit what we spend on the other two components, which you could tell if you saw the media, right? So we sell by trying to figure out what your goal is, meet your goal, and then sell on either a CPM or CPA basis, depending on which you want. But that's how we sell. But we have had people pushing back, and so that's why I asked the question. Should we be rethinking that model?
Yeah, and I would just kind of follow up. I mean, again, we've had that great debate internally at ours. I just picture a person on our team right now. It's like, good debate. Like, why are we so fixated? Do you care? To your point, do you care? I mean, I'm doing the reverse back to how this person had a discussion with me. They hit the case, guys. Why the hell do you care, JSD? Why, so again, it's not that it's right or wrong. What I would just suggest is maybe you would, to the extent that it works with your model, you might want to offer up. Do that, you might think of a couple different ways, because I think you're going to find marketers. I think you're increasingly going to find marketers that are going to want it one way or the other, or at least test and learn on both sides, and that may be beneficial.
Thank you. Other questions? Go ahead, Charlie.
Hey, Charlie Weiss from News Corp. Going over to privacy, you said you collect 2 billion locations a day at Foursquare. So do you see this becoming an issue with targeting and tracking with, the more data you collect on locations, with people kind of being freaked out by it?
Well, I think, again, it comes down to, first of all, what the user it knows is going on. So when the user, our users use Foursquare, they are opting in and giving us permission, knowing that the experience we're creating for them is a better experience because of that. So there's a trust and a transparency knowing that. So that's important. Where it breaks down is if you're not, you're not clear. And I think there's, when you're on Facebook now, or even you're on Weather app, I mean, most of the apps are grabbing your location. When you're tagging a photo on Instagram, there's a location, right? So I think over time, certainly consumers are getting more and more comfortable with the concept of sharing location, as long as there's a value exchange and as long as they can opt out, right? And as long as they know what you're doing with that data. And that's again goes back to the why we aren't just, free here, come everyone, use our data how you want. You have to be very careful, because our agreement with our consumer and the user is that of we have guidelines and restrictions around what we can do with it.
So I'm going to follow up, because Charlie, I know you're a publisher as well, running the programmatic initiatives at News Corp. Last question for you is, how are you guys dealing with that? You guys have some very rich data on your audiences. How do you guys deal with the issues of privacy?
Yeah, we do. We have great login data, and we have a huge data policy that all users are aware of what's going on our websites, and all of our partners. Our MSAs with DMPs are probably the longest we've ever seen as a result of our privacy concerns. So we take it very seriously, and we always look towards what's going to be the next thing people are freaked out about in terms of targeting. Location-based targeting, I think, is something that's very good for the programmatic space, but it has to be done very carefully. So.
Luckily, News Corp has never gotten in trouble with any privacy.
No comment.
Well, great. I think with that, we're gonna wrap up. We've got our next guest coming up. Thank you to both Steven Rosenblatt of Foursquare and Jon Suarez-Davis of Kellogg's. Great having you here. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.